does the word but do the same thing as a conjunction? Are we missing something if we start treating it like that? Let's consider. Hello, I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Channel Introduction to Propositional Logic course. Now, in this course, we've talked about truth-functional connectives. We'll especially be interested in two-place connectives today and throughout the rest of this chapter. And our two-place connectives, remember we had the conjunction, the disjunction, the conditional, and the biconditional. And the thing about the truth-functional connective was that it took two propositions, slapped them together, and the result was a proposition that was either true or false based on those component propositions being true or false. Whatever combination you had there, right? That was going to give you your truth value. We use truth tables to figure out what the new proposition should be, true or false. But in talking about those, we used words for each one of those connectives: and, or, if then, if and only if. And the fact is that there could possibly be other words that we could use as connectives, right? Possibly in those specific conjunction, disjunction, playing those kinds of roles. So an obvious one for today, we're going to be talking about conjunctions today, the word plus. If I say, I like logic and I like philosophy, that would be, let's say we symbolize I like logic as an L, I like philosophy as a P. I could say L and P, there's my new proposition. It's a conjunction. But if I say I love logic plus I love philosophy, well, that's the exact same thing, right? The word plus is just doing the exact same job as the word and was doing before. So possibly we have other words that can fill in for the word and. It doesn't have to be and. We just call a disjunction whatever it is. Any kind of connective that takes two propositions, puts them together, and the resulting truth value we determine by the conjunction's truth table. Now let's consider that proposition L and P, based on our truth table, it's only true, L and P is only true when both L is true and P is true. So in order for L and P to be true, it has to be true that I like logic, and it has to be true that I like philosophy. If it's true that I like logic but false that I like philosophy, then that statement L and P is false. If it's false that I like logic but true that I like philosophy, again, that statement L and P is false. And finally, if I don't like either, if it's false that I like logic and false that I like philosophy, then once again, L and P is going to be false based on that truth table. So the word plus or the word and can fill in for that truth connective, right? They both can do the job of that truth table. Are there any other candidates that we have? Yes, indeed, we do have one candidate, but it's kind of an oddball, and it's the word but. And by but, I mean however, not like badonk, but, right? And speaking of which, if you are interested in t-shirts that are both clever and hilarious that will make you the talk of any party that you enter, check out my Etsy store. I have a t-shirt there with Democritus that says, philosophers have great butts, as in great, I hear what you're saying, but, right? Hilarious, right? I know. I couldn't believe when it just came to me. So yeah, check out that my Etsy store. I'm actually wearing one of my shirts right now. I don't know if you can see it. Whoa. It says philosophy juice, ambrosia for the mind. And that's because I love coffee. But yeah, check out my Etsy store. It will definitely help me with this channel. I'll put a link in the description. But back to the butts. So there are actually a number of kinds of butts. The first one we'll talk about, and I'll talk about the few kinds just to get them out of the way. So these aren't going to be the connective butts, but there is the exception butt, the accept butt, I should say. So for example, my favorite band, Starflyer 59, has this song, "You Got Time for Everyone But Me." Notice the word "but" there is basically doing the job of the word "except." You have time for everyone except for me. Or in basketball, you say he hit nothing but net, right? He hit nothing except he did hit the net, right? And in those cases, the word for except is not really connected. It's not really connecting two propositions together. It's not like you're saying he hit nothing and he hit the net. That's not exactly what you're doing, right? Instead, we typically use this word, the except but, with universal quantifiers like all or every or nothing or everything or everybody. Everybody except for, but me. And that's just like picking out one thing out of many, but not connecting two propositions. So that's not the kind of but we're talking about. There's also the all but. I all but gave up on you. And this kind of but is saying something like the except but. It's saying like it was almost completely given up on, except for I decided not to, or something like that, right? So that's not really a connective either. It doesn't put two propositions together like that, or at least it's not two-place connective. The next kind of but is a but for. And oh my, now that I'm saying it, I'm thinking about like elementary school. You tell somebody, hey, dude, can you grab me that but for? And they say, what's a but for? It's for pooping. I don't know. I'm so sorry. I apologize. But that was, I thought that was genius back then. Now it's still pretty witty. You can use in something like, there but for the grace of God go I, right? If it weren't, and this is like counterfactual. If it weren't for the grace of God, I would have done that thing, right? So a but for, like there but for the grace, that's like setting up a counterfactual. So this is a connective in a way, but it's not the connective we're interested in, the conjunction. The kind of but that we're interested in, though, is the contrasting but. And what do I mean by that? There is a bright and shining example of this that everybody points to because it kind of brings out something interesting about this word but when we treat it like a conjunction. I mean, consider if somebody had said to you, he was poor but honest, right? Something's odd about that. And you know what? Let's do this. Let's make it racist. And we'll make it racist because I'm allowed to do this because I'm brown. So I'll make it racist so it gives it a little bit of bite. But don't worry, guys, you're safe. What if somebody said about me, he was brown but honest? That sounds wrong, right? If you think about that, he was brown but honest. And why does it sound wrong? Because I am brown and I am honest. So what's wrong with saying I'm brown and honest? And is this kind of a but, this contrasting but, is this a conjunction? Well, remember that a conjunction is just a connective that does that whole truth table thing, right? So let's bring up the truth table and see what happens. We'll start on row 2, by the way. In row 2, if I'm brown and I'm not honest, right? So he was brown but honest. The brown part is true. The honest part is false. He was brown but honest is false, right? It's clearly false if I'm not honest. And just like that in row 3 too, he was brown but honest. If I'm not brown but I am honest, then this is still a false statement. He was brown but honest. And of course in row 4, right? If I'm neither brown nor honest, then he was brown but honest has got to be false. It's that row 1 that's odd, right? What happens when I'm brown and I'm honest? He was brown but honest. Is that true? Well, we wouldn't want to say it's false, right? That would be odd to say he is brown, he is honest, but it's false that he's brown but honest. So what's going on there? Well, there are 2 ways that we can look at this, 2 different strategies here, maybe. And the first one we'll call the hidden conjunct strategy. And that's to say, when you say he's brown but honest, that word but is alluding to an unspoken conjunct there, which is he is brown and he is honest, and brown people are rarely honest, right? Because the word but here is a contrasting but. It's putting 2 things together. This is what's so uncomfortable about it. It puts 2 things together that typically aren't together, right? It's sort of a surprise, right? Like he was tall, but he couldn't dunk. Like you typically would associate being tall with being able to dunk. That's not a great one because I'm tall, but I can't jump to save my life. A lot of basketball today too. So putting those two things together, we might say that contrast there is really just a hidden further conjunct that we didn't. So basically we have two conjunctions here. We have he was brown and he was honest, and brown people are rarely honest, right? So we'll call that like N, right? So B and H, and then and N. And if that's the case, what we can do then is treat it like a complex proposition here and say, yeah, the B and H part is right, but the N part is false. It's not true that brown people are rarely honest. So that's one strategy that we can do, and we're treating the but as a conjunction here. It's a little more complicated than we would have thought at first, and that's not so big of a deal. One problem I would say, though, with this is that it sure doesn't seem like we're asserting that third conjunct. Like the person who is saying it might be implying it on accident, but might not have actually thought through what they're saying, So that when you say, hey, are you implying that brown people are not honest? They say, no, that's not what I'm saying, but it's still true. He was brown, but honest. I don't know. I mean, it's a little uncomfortable, in other words. I don't mean, obviously the racism is uncomfortable, but I mean, the putting that hidden conjunct in there, I don't know. It's questionable. But interestingly enough, in this strategy, we're still treating the word but as a conjunction. We're just treating it as two conjunctions. So a little more complex than we thought, but still would be a truth functional connective. Maybe we would just call it a three-place. I don't know. You could get there just using conjunctions. The second strategy is to say that this is a violation of conventional implicature. If you don't remember what conventional implicature is, it's a little more complicated. Watch the video right before this one, and it'll explain it. But basically, some words, even though they will say something true, the fact that you use them in particular contexts makes them not false but inappropriate. And I don't mean inappropriate like inapprops, like you said some naughty word in kindergarten class. I mean inappropriate as in doesn't make sense in those cases. So in this strategy, we treat B but H as B and H. We treat it just like a regular conjunction. And it has, it follows the same truth table rules as a regular conjunction, only it doesn't make sense to say it. The word but is used to, like we said, to contrast two things that rarely go together. You're surprised that they're together because they don't usually go together. So, for example, if I were to say the car was blue and it had a radio. Okay, great. But what if I said the car was blue, but it had a radio? What? I mean, I guess it's true that it was blue and had a radio. So I guess that's true, but does it make sense to say that, right? Like you're contrasting two things that don't seem to go together. And in the same way, when you say he was brown but honest, you're contrasting two things, being brown and being honest, that don't seem to be particularly, at odds with each other. It doesn't seem all that surprising that somebody would be brown and also be honest. So it's like, it's true, sure. It's just like you're using that word but, and that word but doesn't really make a whole lot of sense there. That's all that's happening. Now, this view, I think, the violation of conventional implicature strategy, I think, is probably a more solid one than the first one. One argument, by the way, given by John Burgess in his Philosophical Logic, which is a gem. If you are enjoying Nicholas Smith's book, Burgess is like next step. He's a little bit next level, but it's really interesting stuff in there. Anyway, his argument is that if it were the case that we had the hidden conjunct, right, the first strategy, then the distaste we have for this saying he was brown but honest would disappear when we changed it or when we used that locution in a question or in a denial. So, for example, if I said, is it the case that he was brown but honest? If it was the case that I had just a hidden conjunct in there, then that question would translate to, is it the case that he was brown and he was honest and that brown people are rarely honest? And that question, you wouldn't feel so, I mean, you would think that it's odd, right? But you wouldn't feel so insulted about it. No, instead saying is it the case that he was brown but honest? You're kind of like, well, why would you ask that, right? That seems wrong. Or if you deny it, you say, well, it's not the case that he was brown but honest. Again, if we used it if we took the third conjunct strategy here, then it would be something like either he is not brown, or he was not honest, or brown people are not rarely honest, or brown people are. It's not the case that brown people are rarely honest. Yeah, that's what it is. Which is an odd thing to say in a denial, right? The whole thing seems confusing, but you wouldn't be pissed at somebody for saying that. Whereas if somebody said to you, he was not brown but honest, that feels kind of odd. Like, he wasn't brown but honest? Are you saying like he was just like all the other brown people, just dishonest people? That sounds kind of odd. So I think this strategy probably is a better one. So we're going to adopt it no matter what, and not a lot is going to ride on it. But what is interesting here is that we have this word "but" that is a conjunction, and it is going beyond what our typical conjunction does. Like, in other words, like, it's appropriate to use it in particular places, but it's not appropriate to use it in other places. Whereas the word "and" or "plus," there doesn't seem to be that kind of restriction on it. We use the word "but" only in places where we're contrasting things that are surprisingly that they're put together, but the word "and" "plus" seem to be free and clear. But again, a conjunction is just the truth table. So if the word "but" uses or follows the rules of that truth table, then the word "but" is a conjunction. A couple of things before we go. There are also a few non-but buts. So for example, there are a bunch of those. Even though, although, though, right? So like, although he was brown, he was honest. That's like saying he was brown but honest. There's also despite the fact that, in spite of the fact that. Then there's notwithstanding the fact that he was brown, he was honest. However, yet, whereas, nevertheless, moreover. He was brown, but nevertheless, he was honest. You can even do this so in other words, what I'm saying here is just like and plus seem to be like going along the same route. This word "but" you can replace with any one of these guys, and they're going to function like that. They'll function like conjunctions, and yet they will be inappropriate to use when the two things that are being put side by side are not contrasted in this way. You can even do this with just a pause, like just a semicolon or an em dash or something like that. So imagine I say something like this: he was brown. He was honest. I didn't say but he was honest, but that pause right there, right, was like kind of like in the place of a but. So you can have even indivisible buts, which is great. Anyway, this was a weird one. I don't even know what the next part is. I think it's 6.2.2. So for next time, read that one. And I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.